It has been a while since I've done this. It's been 7 months. It's been 7 months and I'm filming this on January 2nd. That's a really long time. How's it going, guys? New year, same me. New apartment, new books. I have spent a lot of time the last 7 months starting to film and then erasing the footage, starting to film, starting to edit, erasing the footage. I've been thinking a lot about content and what I want to make, and I think my struggle is that I was creating a lot of academic related type of content for 4 years straight, graduated, and was kind of just off and on and didn't have really a vision. So I really want to dedicate the content that I create to like bookish things and even crafty things. So I might be doing some crochet videos in the very near future. I don't have any like solid plans for anything right now. And I don't even have a solid plan for this video. I just wanted to pull the camera up and talk about books from 2024 and maybe talk about some of my goals and things for 2025. I have my iPad here. I am an iPad girly. So for 2024, I wanted to read 45 books and I met my goal. Yay! I ended up actually reading 47 books, which that is amazing for me. I think that's the most amount of books I've read in an entire calendar year. And so I'll talk about my reading goals and stuff for 2025, but I just wanted to go through all of the books that I remember and then talk about some of my favorites from this year. I will link my story graph down below. I'll just go through the chronological list of books, but I cannot promise that I will remember every single book that I have read this year. I usually start my new year off with a reread. I'm not doing that this year, but last year, 2024, I did that with The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan, and I love that book. It is my favorite dystopian ever. And it's basically, you have our main character. She is a mother and she's also a professor, I believe. She's Chinese American and she has a 1-year-old daughter that she left at home while she went off to work, and the child was found. There's custody and battles and legal battles, and the punishment for the main character is that she's sent to the School for Good Mothers. And it's like this like dystopian ass program for mothers that have been caught in some sort of criminal activity or activity that like other people would deem unfit, that a mother should be doing. There's also School for Good Fathers, which they kind of touch on later in the book. Any sort of read about motherhood, womanhood, I'm very interested in, and I love The School for Good Mothers. I recommend it to a lot of people, but I don't recommend it to my friends that are mothers. If you're looking for something a little sci-fi, a little dystopian, I highly recommend The School for Good Mothers. Next, I listened to Aloha Rodeo, 3 Hawaiian Cowboys, the World's Greatest Rodeo, and a Hidden History of the American West. Honestly, this is one of those audiobooks that I listened to on my commute from work a couple of days that week. So I don't remember too much, but basically I think the argument is that cowboys in Hawaii were the first cowboys before the Wild Wild West. So there was a lot of comparison between the two. Because of colonization in Hawaii, that is how cowboys came to exist, because the cattle industry didn't exist until colonization happened. And then I read Cannibalism, A Perfectly Natural History. Very like weird fun fact about me is that I do like consuming cannibalism content. Tenders of Flesh, one of my favorite horror books. I don't know what it is. I think it's fascinating of a topic, and this was a more nonfiction historical perspective on cannibalism, and it did reference a lot of pop culture and things like that. Next, I read and mostly listened to The Song of Achilles, and I did not like it. I'm so sorry. I couldn't do it. I don't know what it was. I don't really remember what it's about. And I'm sorry to all this Song of Achilles lovers out there. Just because I'm a hater doesn't mean it's a bad story. Just means it either went over my head, I wasn't comprehending it, or it just isn't my story. So, and that's totally okay. That's totally okay. Next, I buddy read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch with Tia, and I'll link her YouTube down below. We got to buddy read this together. I really liked it. This is a sci-fi thriller book about this man who gets kidnapped. He has a wife, he has a son. He's a professor, and he's kind of living this like normal life or whatever, and he gets kidnapped one day. Come to find out, him from another universe is living a different life, and him in the other universe kidnapped him. You have our main character running around trying to get back to where he lives, like in his own universe. This book really makes you question like every decision that you make, all sorts of questions like that. There's also an Apple TV adaptation to the show, and I loved it. Also, Blake Crouch, I think, writes, at least I read this one and another one I'll talk about in a bit, but the two books I read from him so far, they're really written for television or for film. And I learned that he like produced and wrote and everything, the Dark Matter TV show. And I think the one that I read, Upgraded, I think that's also going to be adapted into something. It reads really well. It's very visual because it's like you're imagining it. It felt like I was reading a filler episode almost, but it was very, very just like visual in my brain, and I loved it so much. And I love this type of sci-fi. I like the dystopian sci-fi type things. Next, I listened to The Micro Stress Effect, How Little Things Pile Up and Create Big Problems and What to Do About It. This was an interesting audiobook because I read it on my commute to and from work earlier this year. There's not like too much that I can remember actually from this book. Like whenever I read nonfiction, like I think I just need to go back and like actually take notes on what I read. This book has a lot of advice on managing the daily small stressors that like snowball into bigger issues. If you're in need of some guidance in that, I would recommend it, but I don't think this book really like helped me out too much. Also, maybe it was a time of year too, like I finished it in like early February. Nothing was really pressing for me at that time, so maybe if I read it at a time where I'm a little bit more stressed out, it would have been a different story. Next, I read another self-help book because I saw all the other girlies on my Goodreads reading this, but it's called How to Keep House While Drowning, A Gentle Approach to Cleaning and Organizing. This book really actually did help me reform my thoughts on certain care tasks and how to go about actually maintaining clean spaces in my home while balancing mental health. And I think I want to go back and read a physical copy of this so that I can like have something physical to go back to, because I did just listen to this, but it's written in a way where you don't have to read in order of the chapters. It's like if you want to listen to a shortened version of this and just skip ahead to here. So I really liked how that was laid out. Also, while I'm here, I should mention that this is the first time I like stopped rating my books based on stars. The only time I gave stars for a book a rating was when it was a 5-star read for me. And I think for me, a 5-star book has to literally change my life or change the way I see the world, view the world, interact with the world. Next, this was also a very audiobook heavy year because next I listened to Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo by Zora Neale Hurston. This was my first Zora book, and I do want to pick up on some more. I love the oral history aspect to it. I was listening to this at a time in my work where we were talking a lot about oral histories. So learned a lot from this. Want to go back to it again. Next, this was my first 5-star read of the year. Absolutely loved it. Leslie fucking Jones by Leslie Jones. I love a memoir. I love an audiobook that's unabridged and fabulous. Leslie Jones read her own memoir, and there are moments where she's laughing with you. She starts crying. She's like, literally is like, I'm in the studio and I'm looking at these people in the studio, and she's pointing at them and talking to them while she's reading this audiobook. It just added to the listening experience and just added to my appreciation for Leslie Jones, because I know of her work on SNL, not really much else. So got to learn more about her backstory. This was a longer listen. This was a 16.5-hour audiobook. I'm sure I finished it in like 9 hours or so. This was just overall so great. I love comedy. I love stand-up comics. I go to comedy shows and improv shows and things like that just for the hell of it. This book was hilariously written, but it balanced out very beautifully with the sadder moments, some more reflective moments, and just Leslie Jones has a great appreciation for life, and I finished this book with a great appreciation for my life and my own backstory, and just thank you, Leslie Jones. I highly recommend this one. Next, I listened to Rich AF, The Winning Money Mindset That Will Change Your Life. I follow Vivian too on all the socials, love her content. So of course I was going to listen to it. This is again another like nonfiction book that I need to stop listening to like self-help nonfiction on audio so that I have the physical thing to go back to. But I love how accessible Vivian's like knowledge is to the rest of the world. Her videos on Instagram and TikTok are just so easy to learn from, and you just want to keep learning from Vivian, and her writing is laid out in the same exact way. Next, I listened to Only One Left by Riley Sager. Not a fan of this one. I don't know if it was just the writing style. There was something about this. I also listened to it. Maybe it was a listening experience, I'm not too sure, but I don't know. I think I'll continue to try out Riley Sager the near future, but I just wasn't really feeling this one. And I do think it did put me in a slump just for a little bit. I read How the Pill Changes Everything, Your Brain on Birth Control. I have been doing a lot of reading on birth control and women's bodies. I've just been really interested in reading from actual doctors and researchers and things like that. And so I really like how the information was laid out in How the Pill Changes Everything. This was one of those books where the pill isn't demonized at all while you're reading it, and the author does not make you feel bad about being on birth control. And that is a complete opposite experience I had from another book that I read recently about birth control that I'll talk about later. I would recommend this one if you're looking to learn more about birth control. I am trying to transition off of birth control. I haven't started that process yet, but I'm in the process of like gathering information, and this book was that first step for me. Next, my friend Sage and I buddy read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but we started this actually a long ass time ago. Like I started reading the physical copy and have a physical copy somewhere. However, for some reason, the both of us could not finish Seven Husbands. So I picked up the last like couple of hours on audio, and it was fine. It was good. There's just something about this that I was like, meh. I read Symphony of Secrets. I also buddy read this with my friend Anna, and honestly, this was, I will talk about my top books of the year, but this was one of my top books of the year. I love Brennan Slocum's writing. Love Symphony of Secrets. Basically, you have this music professor, musician guy. He gets called in from a huge like musical foundation / organization, and they ask him to complete a like symphony, like complete the music to this unfinished symphony by this very famous composer. And our main character literally is like, he is a lifelong fan and researcher of this composer that he's like trying to finish the music for a huge concert. But as he's digging through some more information and digging through the history and trying to figure out like how would this composer like write this music out, he discovers another secret. He figures out that the white famous composer has somehow, some way, maybe stolen music from a black composer. And he just goes down a rabbit hole, and there's some relationship between him and that. And anyway, it's just so good. It's mysterious. It made my heart beat multiple times, and I was just so excited. This might be one of my longer books that I read this year, and I just loved it. I love Brendan Slocum. He's a Carolinian. I think he's in Fayetteville or from Fayetteville, so North Carolina. So I consider this Southern literature and love it. Next, I read my first Abby Jimenez book, and then I realized there's actually a series. So I read Yours Truly, which is number 2 in the Part of Your World series, and I loved it. I ate it up. I was so full by the time I finished this book. I loved it. Back in the day, I bet there are YouTube videos of me being like, I don't read romance. I read romance this year and I loved it, but I specifically really only read Abby Jimenez and a couple other people. I'm being so freaking honest right now. All of Abby Jimenez's books like blended together in my brain after I finished all of them. I think I needed to space it out a little bit more for me to like freaking remember the plot of these stories, but I remember loving it. This was my first one, and I just went down a rabbit hole after that. Next, I read this itty bitty little poetry book called The Song of Everything, A Poet's Exploration of South Carolina State Parks. Glennis Redmond is the Greenville poet laureate. After her cancer diagnosis, she started spending a lot more time outside, I think with her grandson or some like young male family member. And this was a small little book of poetry from her time exploring these state parks with her son after her diagnosis. Next, I read Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement by the one and only Angela Davis. Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, they're my, what is it called? Patron saints. I love them both. Learned a lot from this collection of essays, and this is also one of those books that's on every list. Lists of like books that you should read. So I was like, I just need to do it. Next, I read Slow Noodles, a Cambodia memoir of love, loss, and family recipes. This one was great. I really liked reading this because there are actual recipes incorporated into the memoir. And if you're looking for something to read that's like informative and also very reflective and emotional, but you also have a break in between some of these big feelings with a recipe every now and then, this is your book. I picked up A Burst of Light and Other Essays by Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde has never done me wrong. So this is a part of the summer where I was deep in my Abby Jimenez grind. I listened to the Happy Ever After playlist, loved it. And then I read Memorial by Brian Washington. Wasn't really too big of a fan of this book. This kind of just felt like a slice of life type of book. And I don't know, I think I just needed a little bit more than that from this, but the writing was beautiful. Story just wasn't my type of story. I listened to Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and then I listened to Just for the Summer because my library hold came in. It was very, very, very popular last summer, and Just for the Summer is one of my top books for 2024. I just felt like I had to include it in there because I spent a lot of time with Abby Jimenez this summer. My camera started overheating. I have been talking for like 30 minutes now, so I'm gonna move on. I started reading Found. I think this is where like my love of sci-fi started because this is a sci-fi time traveling type of book. But basically a group of kids in this one like small town or whatever town that they live in, like they all realize that they're all like adopted from the same agency or whatever. Somehow, some way, I'm not gonna share it, but they discover that they are missing children from history. Kidnapped children from history, but they were kidnapped people that like if they disappeared they wouldn't have made such a huge impact on the world timeline. So then I read The Magician's Nephew and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I did want to read all of Narnia in 2024, but I lost motivation for that very quickly. So next I read The Trees by Percival Everett. This is my first Percival Everett book, and honestly I would categorize this book as a revenge fantasy. But there might not even be like any fantasy like elements in it. It just felt a little fantastical, very mysterious. Basically, this book is about lynchings and generational karma, I would say. These murders start happening in Money, Mississippi, but specifically it's these like white men that are being unalived, and their bodies are mutilated, and next to these mutilated bodies of these white men is the mutilated body of a black man or a boy. And come to find out, descendants of Emmett Till's family or of similar. It's hard to explain this book without giving away the small details that like make this book so amazing. This is also a 5-star read for me. I was just enthralled the entire time I was reading it. And I was like, there was a feeling of vindication at the end of it. But I also was just a little bit scared. I was like, oh, interesting. And also the way, I think if I remember correctly, the way the book ended, you're kind of left questioning some things that leave room for your imagination. So anyway, Percival Everett is coming to my workplace for a literary festival in April. And so I'm currently reading Erasure by him, and I love it. Next, I listened to The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. Love my girl Kelly. I feel so bad for saying this, but I had no idea of the fantastic life that Kelly Bishop had like before Gilmore Girls. And not like fantastic as in fantastic, but fantastic in like that woman worked hard to get to where she is now. And like I have a deeper appreciation for her because I'm biased. I love Gilmore Girls and I love Emily Gilmore. And she explains certain things about Emily Gilmore that just make me like understand Emily Gilmore just a little bit more in a different way. But this was a really fast-paced like memoir, so I would recommend it, especially on audio because Kelly Bishop reads it. Next we have Evil Eye by Toph Ram. She also wrote A Woman Is No Man, which was one of my top reads of 2023. But we follow our main character Yara. She is Palestinian living in Brooklyn, New York, and she, you know, she has a family, she has the kids, she has a husband, she has a job that she wanted, she went to college. So there's something in her that just feels like she's not like fulfilled in a way that she really needed to be. And there was a lot of unresolved past generational trauma that also kept kind of coming up. And there's like a racist situation that happens in the workplace that kind of triggers some things. So I love this book. You're rooting for Yara the entire way. And yeah, I just love anything that Toph Ram writes, and I think she's an auto-buy author for me, so I love this. This is also one of my top reads. Next, I read very quickly The Magician. This was just a very short story, like 25 pages, but there's a collection of these called Good Intentions, and this is the first one. Read it. It was great. It was very interesting, and I don't really do like short stories too often, but this one kept my attention and I liked it. Next, I listened to Men Have Called Her Crazy by Anna Marie Tendler. I really only knew Anna Marie Tendler as John Mulaney's ex-wife and like loved her in that capacity. Never really knew and understand her as the artist that she is, but she chronicles her experience checking herself into the psych hospital, but also a lot of interactions that she has had with men that have like formed her like health experiences and life experiences kind of in a negative way. Next, I read The Violin Conspiracy. This is my second Brendan Slocum novel that I read. This one is about a Black violinist who comes up really from nothing in terms of like accessibility to like musical training, but he is so freaking good at violin and he competes really well. And the family violin that he was gifted by his grandmother, come to find out, is actually a very, very, very expensive Stradivarius, I think is how you pronounce it, Stradivarius violin that goes for like millions of dollars, and it gets stolen before a huge competition. You get like both the historical context from his family and like the importance of this violin and family dynamics, and you also get the side of him trying to like uncover this mystery of where the hell his violin is. I wasn't too like excited about the way this ended, but I think the way the story was written and just the plot of this story is what made it a top read for me. And again, Brendan Slocum's writing really hits home for me. I listened to Leaving Atlanta. This one was kind of a sad one to listen to. So this is a book about the summer in the 1980s Atlanta where Black children just were being kidnapped and murdered. So you're following, I think it's 3 different perspectives, but it's like each chapter is a child's perspective from that summer in the 1980s. I think it's like 1982. Following different kids with different experiences related to the disappearances, and it's like really heartbreaking to read. Any book that I read that's from a child's perspective like that is just so hard to listen to and to read. Next, I listened to a very quick romance book just for funsies, but it's called Make a Scene. This one, I don't know. Romance books are great to read just when you need a little pick-me-up, because I recently learned for something to be classified as a romance, it has to have a happy ending. And like, you know how every romance book is going to end. They're going to end up together. And that's what I was rooting for. And I really like it. Also, there was a slight miscommunication trope. Not miscommunication. It's a fake dating trope. And every fake dating trope I feel like turns into some sort of like miscommunication plot, which is some of the Abby Jimenez books. But anyway, this the female main character needed a like fake boyfriend to go to her cousin's wedding, but the cousin is getting married to her ex like fiance or ex-boyfriend or whatever. The male main character is like the fake boyfriend, but he actually owns a gym next door to the bakery that the female main character owns, and it spirals into other things, and I love it. Next, I read Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. This one was fascinating. There's transgender representation in it. There's grief representation. I think this is one of those books that I kind of just finished and didn't really know how to reflect on it, so I haven't really reflected on it. I would recommend this if you need like a short story that has a little bit of, it's a little bit magical and it's reflective, and you have a very interesting main character. That's all I can really say. Next, I listened to Inciting Joy by Ross Gay. Ross Gay is just so fun to read. This book was about things that incite joy and what joy incites, and it's so interesting. The one that sticks out to me was this chapter about teaching and how a traditional classroom now isn't set up with a lot of joy in the curriculum or in its teaching. So next I read The Full Moon Coffee Shop. This one was a fun magical realism fantasy type of read. Maybe it's more like fantasy than magical realism, honestly, but basically a coffee shop, the Full Moon Coffee Shop, pops up only during the full moon and only where needed. It literally will like pop up in the back of an alley, and it's like beautifully set up like a food truck coffee shop, but it's run by freaking cats, like human-sized cats that talk to you. And everything about this book is astrological. Everything. So I think there's like 3 or 4 or 5 main characters. Like each chapter is a different perspective, but all of the characters literally like overlap in their stories, and they all connect together somehow, some way. But all of the different characters are going through some sort of issue in their personal life. And so the cats pop up this coffee shop, and they sit there, and you're not allowed to, you don't order. They bring you what you need, what beverage and food that you need. And they sit there and they explain everything that's happening to you astrologically, and or to the main characters, and then they explain how to go about solving your issue, solving your problem in a way that's aligned with the stars. And I love this book. It was so great. It was a fast read. It was cute. I loved it. I listened to Silver Sparrow by Tayari Jones. Tayari Jones has really fascinating plots. This one I read on audio, and it follows, again, from the children's perspective, but it follows our main character. The first perspective, she knows that her mom is essentially the sidekick, and the father's actually married to another woman with and has another child. And so the first main character knows that she has a half sister, but the other half sister doesn't know that the other one exists. And then the two sisters, their lives like come together, their lives intersect, and then they have to figure out how to live together after that intersection and incident. So yeah. Next, I read Upgrade by Blake Crouch. This one I liked. I like this one, I think, better than Dark Matter. In this like alternate world, gene editing and gene mutation exists and it's very accessible to people, but people are using it for nefarious reasons. For example, people are creating viruses. People are mutating plants and crops, and like things go badly with that and cause worldwide famine, which is what happened to the main character's mother. And then anyway, that's a whole other thing. There's like multiple like subplots going on that create the bigger picture. But basically, the main character, he works for the Gene Protection Agency, which is like a federal bureau where he basically like uses all sorts of surveillance and AI to try and capture and stop evil scientists from gene editing. And during a raid, he gets like blasted with this like icicle bomb, and the shards like get into his skin and somehow, some way edit his DNA, and he's upgraded. He can read while watching TV and having conversation at the same time. He can do like 500 crunches in a go, no sweat. He can like memorize every single thing he's ever read. He can like feel every sensation on his body. Same thing happens to his sister. Anyway, he's working with his sister and or not, to basically figure out what's going on and figure out how his mother is involved in this as well. His mom is an evil scientist. I really like this one. And I'm gonna read more Blake Crouch and find other sci-fi type stories like this, because this was great. Next, I read Beyond the Pill, a 30-day program to balance your hormones, reclaim your body, and reverse the dangerous side effects of the birth control pill. So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this one. If you're going to go into learning about birth control, I highly recommend the other book that I read, This Is Your Brain on Birth Control, and not this book. This one really just felt like she was kind of selling something. And then in the intro, she's like, I don't think birth control, she was like, I'm not going to tell you if you should or shouldn't take birth control, make that decision for yourself. Like she takes a neutral stance, but then I felt like I read a few sections that were like, and that's why birth control is horrible for you. The way she was presenting the birth control pill did not align with the stance that she had taken in the very beginning. And also, like, there were certain sections where it was like, this problem can arise and this problem can arise, and that can be solved with my 30-day program. And so I skimmed through a lot of this book and just really read like the sciencey parts about like the effects on the body and things like that. And I think I skimmed a part that talked about the 30-day program, and there is some sort of powder you have to purchase or make or whatever. I'm not about it. Maybe this can help someone out. Maybe, I don't know. But if you're looking more for just like the information, I recommend the other book. Next, I read a collection of short stories called Blackberries, Blackberries by Crystal Wilkinson. One of my good work friends and just friend in general. She is from Appalachian, Kentucky, and the short story collection takes place in Appalachian, Kentucky, and follows the lives of many different Black women in the area and their experiences. That's coming of age, that's womanhood, that's sexual, that's reflective, that's sad, that's inspiring, all of the above. Really love this. Actually, I'm gonna talk about this one. I read Scent, The Missing Number 2 by Margaret Peter Haddix. I actually like read this earlier in the year after I read Found, but I don't have a date on this and I don't remember when I listened to this. After reading the second book, I was like, I'm okay. I think I'm coming to realize that I don't really care to read series too often, because I only read the first 2 Narnia books and then got tired of it. And the same exact thing happened with this series. I got very tired of reading this after the second book. But that didn't happen with Abby Jimenez though. No. I don't know. So I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, the actual last book that I read in 2024 was Come By Here, a memoir and essays from Georgia's Geechee Coast. And I love this one. So this was locally published. There is a Southern local publishing press in South Carolina. You have Georgia coastal Geechee history intertwined with personal family history and identity, and the author just trying to find a place of belonging and find a place of self. And you really get that in the memoir, and I just loved it. The author is a journalist, so some of the writing is a little journalistic, but that didn't like take away from the memoir experience at all. But also I got to attend an event and meet the author, and the author actually recognized me from Instagram from a book like review and reflection that I had posted, so that was pretty cool. Anyway, those are all of the books that I read in 2024. It was a really good mix. We had romance, we had some nostalgia, we had sci-fi, we had like mystery, we had short stories, we had lots of memoirs and lots of nonfiction. I feel like I'm pretty well read. I do have some reading goals that I set out for myself, and I posted about it on my Instagram, which you can go follow me on. I'm just gonna read off of my reading goals and kind of talk about them for 2025, and then I'll talk about what I'm currently reading. So this video is kind of just gonna have a little bit of everything in it, which is great because we have like 7 months worth of stuff to catch up on. My first goal is to read 50 books, and I think it's doable. I feel so good about reaching this. And I've also reflected on why I put a numerical like goal onto myself for reading. A lot of people don't, a lot of people do. For me, reading is a really good way for me to manage my stress. It's a way of escape. It's a way of entertainment. It's a way for me to engage with the world and learn more about the world. And just be more empathetic. And so that's all the reasons why I love reading. And I think by putting a numerical goal on that, it's less about pressuring myself to read 50 books. It's more about making sure that I make the time to fulfill all of the reasons why I love to read. And seeing as I read 47 books this year, I think 50 books is doable since I know that I could do it last year. But I do want to try and read more than I listen to books this year. And I think lowering my screen time is going to help out a lot with that. So I'll keep you posted on throughout the year. Next, we have read from a country that I've never read from before. So now I'm gonna have to go through my entire Storygraph and Goodreads and figure out which books from like other countries I've read. I know I read from the United States, of course, Japan, South and North Korea. I don't think I've actually read a South Korean book. I read North Korean. I don't actually know. So I'm gonna have to figure this out, and I'm pretty sure my list is actually a lot. Like, I have a ton of options I could choose from. Next, I want to read one new release each month. No problem with reading all like backlog type books or backlisted books and all that. I want to keep up with what's going on. Like when the New York Times like 2024 list came out, and I was like, I haven't read any of these. I haven't heard of any of these. Maybe it's the FOMO, I don't know. But I think reading one new release each month is kind of exciting, but also keeps me in the know, and also forces me to force my library to purchase new books. I have already sent in a list of like new books, and I was like, please put me first on the list if possible. So you can request your library to purchase books if they allow it. I know some libraries have a form online, some you have to call. I personally just send an email to the reference desk, and whichever librarian is on reference desk duty responds to me, and they're always so nice about it. I want to join a book club, but specifically a book club that I don't host. I have a book club with my personal friends in my hometown, and then my boyfriend and I host a silent book club in our hometown. I don't need to be doing any more book clubs, but I would love to go somewhere where someone's doing the hosting already. My local stationery store actually has a book club that I found online, so I signed up for the one in January, and it's at the end of the month, and I'll keep you posted. Last but not least, I have complete my book club bingo. I created a bingo sheet. Let me go get it. So I created this bingo sheet for my personal book club that I host with my friends, and it has a little bit of everything from attend a library program to read a stranger's book recommendation to read a book in a day to read a different format than usual. Like, there's a little bit of everything on this list to kind of encourage people to engage with the book club group chat in between book club meetings and things like that. And it's just fun. Also, so those are the goals that I set out for myself, but here are some like other challenges and things that I want to participate in somehow, some way. My local bookstore, my hometown, M. Judson's, they are hosting a reading challenge for 2025. So they have like a word associated with each month, and so you just have to read a book related to that word or theme somehow, some way. So for January, the word is Hollywood, and there's this book that I really want to read called Made Up Asians, and it's about yellowface in the time of the exclusion era. And so that involves like Hollywood and filmmaking and things like that. So that's a nonfiction I want to read. Over on Instagram, the Free Black Women's Library, she hosts a reading challenge to encourage people to read more books by Black women. And I think it's like 45 books or so, or 45 prompts. So I'm gonna try and combine that challenge with M. Judson's challenge, plus my book bingo, plus my general mood. So there's lots of like challenges and things out there, which is like insane, and I want to participate in them all, but I cannot. So those are my priority. And then on the Storygraph app, participating in the January Pages challenge. I have the January challenge listed here, where you just track at least a book where you track at least a page a day, and then everyone that participates is entered into a drawing for all sorts of like fun prizes. So I'm participating in that as well. But now I want to show just a couple of books that I am reading and what I want to read. First, I'm currently reading Erasure by Percival Everett. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to finish this today. But basically, we have our main character, Thelonious? His name is like Thelonious Monk Ellison. He is a writer. He goes by the name Monk. And he is a writer, but he hasn't been able to get any of his manuscripts published recently. And so he comes across this book that is titled Weez Lives in the Ghetto, a first novel by a woman who once visited some relatives in Harlem for a couple of days. And so there's this book that is going wildly popular, and he just finds it offensive, and he's like, if this is getting published, why can't my work get published, sort of situation. All that's happening, his mother has Alzheimer's, his sister is unalived because she's an abortion provider and was killed in her clinic. His brother's got some like drama on his own. So there's a lot of family drama and family secrets coming about while he's trying to like figure out his writing career. So what he does is he writes a book called My Pathology. He writes under a pseudonym, and it goes big. I really like it. I feel like Erasure is kind of made up of multiple little books. Because he's a writer, there's like paragraphs where you're reading the main character's writing, which is also actually just Percival Everett's writing. And I think I'm going to read James next after I read this. And I might purchase James because I get to see the author in April. Next is How to Fall in Love in a Time of Unnameable Disaster. This takes place in a post-apocalyptic New York City where it is a toxic wasteland. And this is the book club, like group discussion for the new book club that I signed up for at the end of the month. So this is a pretty short read. I'm gonna try and like take notes or annotate it or whatever, so that if I read it now, I'll remember it like later this month as well. But I'm really excited about this, but I'm especially excited about this. I have 5 chapters left, and I think that's actually what I'm gonna do next after this. Anyway, I know this is a long video. I just needed to get it all out and just talk about everything that I've read, because I actually I really haven't spent a lot of time on Instagram talking about all of the books that I've read in 2024. And I think I want to reserve my YouTube for the longer form content about the books that I read and the art that I create. And then my Instagram will be kind of like a snippet of life sort of situation, sort of like, here's what I'm reading, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I suggest sort of platform. And I hope you're all along for the ride, because I am making it a goal as well. I didn't share it on Instagram, but one of my goals is to like post more on Instagram and connect with the bookish community and make more bookish friends. So if you are watching this and you are on Bookstagram, I would love to connect with you. And yeah, last bookish friend I made, Tia, we send each other snail mail now. So if you want some snail mail, let me know as well. But anyway, mwah, Love you lots. Thanks for tuning in and for sticking to the end of this video and for being here. Please subscribe,